Hi class, wanted to talk to you a little bit about MLA formatting. Here we have the OWL PowerPoint that I've linked for you, and I'm going to walk through it today so that you can reference it and go back as you need help. So let's get started. The first thing you want to notice is that the MLA does change, and so you want to kind of keep up to date. The best way to do that is to use the OWL at Purdue, but there's also handbooks that you can purchase if another instructor would ask you to. I tell you just use the OWL because it's the most up-to-date. We're going to talk about the formatting, InText Citations, and Works Cited. So there are three simple guiding principles. You want to cite simple traits shared by most works. Remember, there's more than one way to cite the same source, and always make your documentation useful to readers. As you get higher up in academia, people are going to be reading your work, and they're going to want to see what you reference and perhaps use your references as an extended bibliography for them or reading list. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to set up your paper, section headings, which you're not going to be doing for me, so we'll just briefly cover that. Formatting quotations, which will be crucial and where most students kind of trip up, and then documenting your sources. So always follow your instructor's guidelines. Every instructor has what they ask for, so make sure that you're doing that. Your MLA style paper should be plain white paper, 8.5 by 11, double spaced, 12 point, New Roman, or a similar font. I know Google Docs has Arial, I believe, is their thing. All margins 1 inch. Google Docs, you'll need to set it 1 inch, but if you have Word, then it's automatically 1 inch. Word also has an MLA format template that you can use, and you can search for that in your Word if you use that. And then you always want to indent the first line of your paragraphs 1/2 inch by using tab. So you always want a header with the page numbers up in the right. It says use italics for titles, but they're not talking about the title of your essay. They're talking about titles of books or movies or newspapers. And then we're not going to worry about end quotes because we're not using them here. So the first page, no title page, double spaced everything. You're going to have your name, my name, the course, and the date in the upper left corner. That's all going to be double spaced as well. Center your paper title and then create a header in your upper right corner, and that's going to have your page number as well. Here is a great example for you. So you can see the name and the professor's name, the class. Notice the date is an MLA style, so it means the day, the month, and then the year, and then last name and the page number. Notice the title, not italics, but it is centered. Notice that the first letter of each word, just as a title would be, excluding the prepositions there. Okay, we're not going to be using section headings, so I'm going to kind of skim over this part, but they are here, and sometimes people do use them, so you might want to go back and check that out. What I do want to spend time talking about is your in-text citations, because this is where students oftentimes get tripped up. So an in-text citation is a brief reference in your text that indicates the source you consulted. It should direct the readers to the entry in your works cited list source. It should be unobtrusive, which means it should provide the information without really interrupting your own text. It should sound fluid, and in general the in-text citation will typically be the author's last name with the page number, and we'll see some examples. If you don't have an author's last name, you use the article name, which is in quotation marks. So here we have an example. We have the author Wordsworth, stated in romantic poetry, was marked by a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. This direct quotation is taken from page 263. Now, because the author's name is in the sentence, it does not need to be here. We just need the page number. But notice this next sentence, which continues at the citation, says spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, does not have the author's name in the sentence, so you must have it in the parenthetical. Wordsworth extensively explored the role of emotion in creative process. I like this last sentence example because oftentimes students grab information from a text, but because they aren't directly quoting it, they think that they don't have to cite it, and that's not true. That's unintentional plagiarism, and that can really get you in trouble. So make sure that regardless if you are listing the person's name or not, that you have that information there for you. Down here it shows you what it would look like on the works cited page. You notice that the last name Wordsworth is also the first thing that is in the works cited page for easy reference. Here we have a print source. And this one has a signal word, so it says humans have been described by Kenneth Burke, right? Here's your author. It's a symbol using animals, so it only has the page number. This one leaves out the author's name. Humans have been described as symbol using animals, and that has Burke. I tell students the first time you kind of want to introduce who you're citing because it is part of your ethos and credibility as a writer. But after that, it's nice just to kind of make it more fluid and you don't have to introduce the person because you already have previously, and you can simply put their last name in the parenthetical citation. Okay, no known author, which happens quite a bit. So if you have no author, then you always want to use the title name in quotation marks. So here we see so many global warming hotspots because the region has more readily accessible climate data. Notice that this is fluid with the writer's own words here. And when it is fluid like that, it doesn't necessarily need a comma, so that's something you might want to think about. Also notice that the period is always outside the parenthetical citation. Students oftentimes think it has to go inside, but it is actually at the outside. Here's the works cited page, what it would look like since we don't have the author's name. We start with just the title. We have the container, which is the website. We have the date the website was updated, and then we have the day that you accessed it, the day that you saw it. Multiple editions, there are some different ways to look at this. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but if there are different editions, you put the edition and then where you found it from. This does actually happen more often than not, authors with the same last name. So here we have R. Miller and A. Miller, two different authors. So all you have to do is put the first letter of their name to differentiate, and we would see that in your works cited as well. So if you have multiple authors, which happens quite a bit when you're doing your peer-reviewed research, you have multiple, typically doctors working on things together. So you normally have that ETAL in order to say that Smith and these other people all argue that tougher gun control is not needed. Notice again how this does not have quotation marks, but because this information is from this Smith, ETAL, that you still have to give a citation for it. You can also say the author states and put it at the end if it is not in your sentence, or you can say a study, which often students do, and then you can put the author's name kind of afterwards here. Here, because there are two, when there's multiple authors, when you have two, it's fine to list both, but then when there's three or more, that's when you use ETAL. Multiple works by the same author, again, this happens because you have experts in the field and they might write more than one article on your topic. So here we have Leitner, who has written two articles, one article called Too Soon and one article called Hand-Eye Development. So you would want to put the name in the sentence, and then your parenthetical would be where you would put the actual article name in quotation marks and the page number if you have it. Here we have multi-volume work. So if you have something like the Quran or the Oh no, here's the Bible. I was going to say the Bible, the Quran. There are specific ways to use different religious texts, so you want to be aware of that. Also, multi-volume works, you want to tell the volume and number where you got it from. Citing indirect sources happens quite often too. In newspapers, we see this quite a bit. So if you're looking at the Oregonian or you're looking at the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune, the author's name might be Wiseman, who's writing, but they're not actually saying the words, they're actually quoting someone else. And so you want to put the person's name who is speaking in the sentence. So Ravitch argues he's the one who's saying this, or she is the one who's saying this. And then down here you say, this is the article where I found it, this is the author, and this is what I would look for in your works cited page, the Wiseman, not the person who's actually speaking, because this is the person who wrote it. Multiple citations, so Romeo and Juliet, right? You have it here, you have it here, and so we can say that these are two different page numbers and the author is at the end. Works in time-based media, so when you use things like documentaries or Netflix, here they have, of course, Buffy from Buffy's Vampire Slayer. You can go ahead and put the time in there. You want to put the name of the actual episode that you saw. And then down here, you would put down who created it, who edited it, and then the season episodes, and we'll have more details on that. Sources without page numbers, you simply put the name. So you see here, it would simply be name, and this is happening more and more as we're doing more things on the web, so that's more acceptable. And then the works cited entry would, of course, have the name here. And I would notice as the instructor that the works cited entry isn't having page numbers, because you would have page numbers here if it was something with page numbers from like a journal. Short prose quotations you are going to insert. So notice how this quotation is in the middle of the sentence. When that happens, you put the parenthetical directly after the quotation. You don't need to wait till the end, so it is going to interrupt it. Don't worry about your readers. This is MLA, and this is how they have us do it, so don't feel like it's going to ruin your flow. It is there. You also have here, if we put the name earlier, then we don't need to have it here. Or you can even change, if you're ever using a question, a rhetorical question, which I always encourage students to do, you can always have the question mark at the end. It does not need to be a period. Quoting more than 4 lines. In this, I always tell students all bets are off. The quotation marks are dropped. The period goes here, if you can see it. I guess I can move a bit right there. And then the parenthetical. So entirely different. And here you just tab and all of them will go over. When you start your paragraph, again, because typically your paragraph is going to continue with commentary and analysis, it's going to be flush to show your readers that you're going to continue on. If you're starting a brand new paragraph, which I typically tell students don't, because you don't want to just drop a quote there and not discuss it, but then you would tab to show it is a new paragraph. When you're doing poetry, you're going to be using slashes, and you're going to give line numbers. Here is the author here, and you could put the author there if you would prefer. And if it is stanzas, you could do that as well. So it kind of depends upon the poem and how you're going to cite it. So remember to use block quotations for more than 3 lines of poetry. If the poem is formatted in an unusual way, you might actually, especially if it's short, like a haiku, you might want to actually put the whole poem in there as it stands, or something like a found poem might want to put it in there, kind of like a graph. This is important when you add words here. You always want to add your words in brackets to make it more fluid, and then I know you added those words. And then if you're taking words out, you just want to use ellipses. It's always 3 ellipses, and you always want to have the quotation probably on the same page. Works cited. We're going to talk about this in another video, but I just want you to know that the OWL does have all this information, and I can always help you, or perhaps you can see the Writing Center, which is also a big help. So hopefully this helped you go through exactly what you needed for in-text citations, and we'll talk about the works cited in another video.